Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and today we are going through my June TBR. June is Pride Month, so I am going to be focusing on reading stories from LGBTQIAP+ authors and about LGBTQIAP+ characters, and I did that last year. It was an incredible reading month. I read the most books out of any other month of the year in June, I believe, in 2019, and it was also a super highly rated month, so I'm feeling really good. I'm also reading some sequels to books that I read last June this year, doing some fun readathons, and I'm just feeling really excited and ready for this month to start. In a surprise to absolutely no one, I have too many books on my TBR and I won't be reading all of these, I don't think. I know I won't be reading all of these. I have such a hard time editing down my TBR lists, and I find that it's easier for me anyway to have a ton of options and pick from within there rather than limiting myself and then reading through all of them and being like, what do I read next? Without any further ado, let's talk about first the readathons that I'm going to be participating in, and then we'll go into the books I'm reading for each. The first is a month-long readathon, and it is really creative and pretty inspired by fantasy and also inspired by Rachel Marie's Book Junkie Trials from last summer, and it's the Make Your MythTaker readathon. So Ashley and Charlotte, I will leave their channels linked below and just the info about this and the other readathons and everything in the description box. They created a sort of like quest style readathon. With this one, basically you pick a character that you want to become and you read the books that you need to read in a specific order, and there's no doubling up, all of that. It's very formulaic, which I really appreciate and I really like. I've decided to try to become a knight over the course of June, and like I said, there are 4 books for each prompt, so I'll be reading 4 books throughout the course of the month to complete this. The other readathon is the Gays Gone By readathon, which is all about reading LGBTQIAP+ stories in historical settings. There are 3 hosts for this one, Lily, Jemima, and Eloise. Again, I'll link them down below, and I'm really excited about this one. It's a bingo board style, so this one I'm just gonna be picking a few and hoping to complete as many bingo squares as I can. I didn't want to go super overboard with the readathons this month. There are so many good ones happening, but I needed to limit myself, and these were the ones that that I already had books on my TBR that would fit really nicely, so that's what we're doing. But seriously, there are so many good ones. Check them all out. All right, let's finally get into the books. I'll talk first about my MythTaker books that I'm going to be reading. So again, there are 4 prompts for each character. The first one for Night is to read a book by a favorite author. I am going to be reading 4 sequels actually for this readathon, which I'm really excited about. So really any of these books could be a favorite author, but this is the one that fit in, and that is A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the 2nd book in her Wayfarers trilogy. I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet last summer, and it was in my top 10 books of the year. This one is less of a quest or adventure story from what I gather, and more of a character-driven story. It follows one particular character from the first book and kind of their coming to an understanding about themselves. It's like kind of a spoiler to talk about who they are, I guess, so I'm not going to, but I'm super excited. I feel like it's going to be very interesting, and I am excited that this is going to be probably the first book that I read, because for whatever reason, I have now put off reading the rest of the trilogy for a year, which is just unacceptable. The next prompt is to read a book with a weapon on the cover. And for that, again, another sequel to a book that I read last June. I have We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Tehlor Mejia. There are 2 knives on here, if you can see that. This is sort of like a dystopian story about, or the first one is about 2 women who attend this sort of elite school for women in this society to become wives of prominent men. And each man in the world is assigned 2 wives, one who is more of like his confidant and strategist and is more of the like practical, logical, logistical person, and then the second wife is you know, the wife who takes care of the home and has children and is their lover. So it's 2 like separate identities within being a wife. The first book follows Danny, who is the primera, the first wife of this very entitled young man who is set to like take over as the, I think, president of this society, and her rival from school, Carmen, is the segunda, the second wife, and it's a love story between the 2 of them, and it's so good. It's a really great rivals to lovers, and I absolutely adored that one. It also made it onto my top 10 books of the year, and this book, the sequel, came out fairly recently, and it's from Carmen's perspective, and I'm really, really interested to see where this one goes. But I really enjoyed this world, and I really enjoyed what Tehlor K. Mejia did with the first book, so I'm excited to dive into this one very soon. The next book is just to continue a series, and again, this could be any of the 4 books that I'm reading, but I specifically picked out The Electric Heir by Victoria Lee. This is the sequel to The Fever King, which again I read last June, and I gotta be honest, I'm a little nervous and I might have to swap it out. So this is essentially about a pandemic. It's about a virus, and it's very different than, you know, COVID-19. Obviously, it's a sci-fi futuristic story, but synopsis is all about like getting the vaccine, and I just like, I can't decide if it's going to be a positive COVID read or like, ugh, I can't do it. So we'll see. And then finally, the last prompt is to read a book featuring a quest to save something. And so for that, I will finally be picking up and finishing The Stone Sky by NK Jemisin. This is the 3rd and final book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I started this trilogy in February and absolutely adored the first book, immediately read the second. It's incredible. It's such a good series, and I'm so excited to read the conclusion, but also really nervous because I feel like it's going to destroy me a little bit. Not going to go into what this is about, of course, because it is the final book, and there are plenty of spoilers, but definitely a quest to save the world, which is basically like the entire series, but I think it's definitely going to get to that point with this one. And now for the Gaze Gone By readathon, I haven't really picked out specific books for each bingo board. I've just kind of chosen a few historical novels that feature LGBTQIA+ plus characters, and I will fit them in as I read them. So I'm just gonna go in no particular order. So first up, I have Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This is a story about 2 12-year-old boys who meet and become friends, and over the years, slowly something more blossoms between them. But then we flash forward like 10 or 15 years, I think, and they are no longer speaking. One of them is married, the other one is nowhere in sight, and so it's just kind of examining like what happened in the years in between. It's pretty short, it's only like a couple hundred pages. Yeah, it's just over 200 pages, so I've heard really, really good things about it. This one would fit for a couple different prompts. The rainbow book stack, it's like this beautiful, this cover is incredible if you can kind of see, but it's got a nice yellow spine. I believe it takes place in England, yes, in Oxford, so it would count for a book set outside of my country. I believe it's set in the 20th century, at least partially. I've definitely been recommended this before. I think that's it. So yeah, I definitely want to get to this one this month. I've picked it up a couple different times and just never given it enough of a chance to like fully get engrossed, but I think this is definitely the time to do so. Next is very different, but Timekeeper by Tara Sim. This is actually a historical fantasy story, so it's like a steampunk novel set in an alternate Victorian London, and it's about 2 boys who are like, I don't know, something to do with like fixing clocks, and time is a very interesting part of this plot. I know very, very little about it, but I remember my friend Spencer from Common Spence recommended this in his review. He said like the less you know going into it, the better. So I haven't really looked into it much, but it is a male-male romance, and historical, so I thought it could work for this. So this would work for the set or written before 1900 prompt. It would work for Rainbow Stack as well, it's gold. It would work for a book I've been recommended and a book set outside of my country. Next up, I have The Amazing Adventures of Kavlier and Clay by Michael Chabon, which I'm actually just now realizing is a long, it's like 640 pages, and also this font is so tiny. I don't know if you can see, that is like microscopic. So I don't know if this is gonna happen during the readathon, to be honest, but I do really want to read this. This is about Joe Kavlier, who is a young Jewish artist who has just fled Prague during the Nazi invasion. And he goes to New York to be with his cousin Sammy, who is looking for someone to help him craft stories in the new like hit thing in America, which is the comic book. And they create all of these comic book stories together. I know that one of them, I think Sammy identifies as gay in this story, and it's, you know, about them creating these stories, but I think also them and their lives in New York City during this time, especially with Joe as a Jewish man who's just fled Europe. I think that's a big part of it, but I'm really excited about this. Again, it can work for the yellow spine, and it's set in the 20th century. Adam recommended this to me. It's one of his favorite books of all time. So yeah, this one does check off some of the boxes, but ones that I can complete in other ways as well. So I don't know, like looking at it, I'm now like, this is maybe not a good choice for a week-long readathon, but whatever, I want to read this at some point. All right, so then I have a couple of ebooks and audiobooks as well. The first of which being The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. And this is one that I feel like everyone has read except me. I feel like this is recommended so often as a queer coming of age story. It's about our main character, Cameron, whose parents have recently died, and she moves in with her ultra-conservative and religious aunt and her equally conservative but well-meaning grandmother. And so she moves to rural Montana, and a new girl moves to town as well, and there's a friendship between them that could be more. It's been on my TBR for ages. The movie came out fairly recently, and I feel like it got another resurgence of excitement. This one is an Own Voices story. I believe it's set in the 20th century, and I saw it on, I think, Jemima's TBR, so it is a host TBR pick. I then have The Lady's Guides to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. Lily actually just read this for a vlog, and it sounds wonderful. It's about a woman who is very well versed in astronomy and gets a gig helping to translate some really prominent work. So she's thrilled about that, and then there's a romance between her and the woman who has hired her. I've only read one historical fantasy and it didn't, or historical romance, and it didn't do much for me, but I definitely wanted to give it the genre another try, so I feel like this one could be a hit. And then finally, I have a novella that I'm really excited about called That Could Be Enough by Alyssa Cole, and it's a like retelling, reimagining of Eliza Hamilton falling in love with her like lady's maid. It's 100 pages, so it's super short. This is written by a woman of color. Alyssa Cole is black, so that will check off that box, and it also is set before 1900. So the only box I don't have is nonfiction. I do have the audiobook of Jonathan Van Ness's memoir, Over the Top, and I imagine a lot of it is set in his childhood, which is pre-2000, so I could potentially count it. I'm definitely gonna listen to that this month because I've just heard really good things specifically about him reading the audiobook. So I am looking forward to that. Okay, let's talk about some honorable mention TBR choices because like I said, I can't stop myself. I still have yet to read The Upside of Unrequited and Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I have been putting these off, and they could be a good quick contemporary for this month. Two other contemporaries that I have on my Kindle that I could see myself picking up at some point are Ramona Blue by Julie Murphy and Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. I've got a couple magical realism, both by Anna Marie McLemore, who I've never read before, but if there was a time to read from them, it's now. So When the Moon Was Ours and Wild Beauty. I have a feeling Wild Beauty is going to be more my thing, but I have both as options. I also have Wilder Girls, which I think features some LGBTQIA+ characters. I don't know that this is a good read for right now as well, because the girls in this story are quarantined on an island, and you know, quarantine hits a little close to home these days. So I don't know, but I'm really intrigued by this one, so potentially. And who knows, there might be more that get thrown into the mix. But that is everything. Like I mentioned, all the details of the readathons that I'm doing will be in the description box, as well as all the books that I mentioned. If you've read any of these and have thoughts before I dive in, please let me know in the comments, or you can find links to all of my social media accounts in the description box if you'd rather connect with me there. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my next video. But until then, happy reading. Bye.